XCC 433, section F1, worldwide, the intersection of race, gender, and COVID-19. We had 4 teams of students. Each team had 4 members, one team had 5 members, and they worked with community partners in Italy, Australia, and the United States. So our team A worked with the Aboriginal Community Services in Australia. Team B worked with, let me get the pronunciation right, Zankan Foundation. I cheated, sorry, in Italy. And teams C and D both worked with the National Collaboration for Health Equity, which is located in the United States in Washington, DC. And they did different projects for that organization, who unfortunately NCHE has been triple booked today and cannot attend, but they're really looking forward to seeing the presentations afterwards. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and start with Team B. And Team B, it's on you. Introduce yourselves and have fun.
Awesome. I'll say just 2 words and then I'll give, Jules all the time she needs. Thank you for that. I just wanted to spend a second to thank the students because, they had the chance to face quite a challenge with this project, discussing about Italy and with very engaging topics, but also very demanding topics. And I certainly wanted to thank them for their work all together as a team, but also for their commitment to the realization of the project. And I wanted to thank the Fondazione Zancan, who's here. They have been working for 50 years in the field of social health, educational policies. They're known worldwide. I think it's worth mentioning, if anybody is interested, that their publications can also be found in the BU library, just in case you are interested. They were, they took a challenge as well to, engage with the students, and they collaborated with them. They brought some useful examples of generative welfare that the students are going to discuss, and that could be, a good response to the COVID-19 crisis. I'm very happy for what, has happened this semester, the way we've been working together as a faculty team and as a student teams and all together. So I don't want to take any more time, and I thank the whole Team B for what they've done today. And I also would like to encourage you to really praise them for, again, working with the countries so different from the one they're normally, discussing in other courses. Thank you so much. And Jules, it's all for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. To begin, my name is Jules Belufka. I'm going to kick us off today. And I want to start by introducing all of our team members for you guys. So again, I'm Jules. I'm an English major with a minor in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Brianna is also an English major with a minor in Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Chris and Carrie are both majoring in political science, and Reese is studying biology and psychology. So all of our group members come from a very broad range of academic backgrounds, and we hope you'll see that reflected in our interdisciplinary approach to this project. One thing we noticed we had in common very early on in the planning of this project was that a lot of us were coming to this class with a really strong interest in LGBTQ rights and extensive knowledge on US-centric queer topics. So we knew we wanted to possibly explore the impact of COVID-19 on LGBTQ communities specifically in our project. Chris and Carrie also had a shared interest in welfare systems, and these varying interests in social issues and welfare systems set us up perfectly for this particular assignment. We'd also like to provide a brief introduction of our community partner. They're an Italian research center, and their mission, as it appears on their website, is to contribute to scientific research of significant social interest, with particular regard to the areas of social policies, services to the person, and the professions operating in it. Their hope in working with us was to educate a larger population of people on the Italian model of generative welfare, and we'll explain some of the details of generative welfare a little bit later in this presentation.
So our task for this project was to deliver a creative final project in the form of a short animated video that promoted the Italian model that our partners at the foundation have contributed a lot of research to of generative welfare. So we wanted the project, most importantly, to be easily accessible. We wanted it to be able to be used to help professionals in the field familiarize themselves with the unique structure of the welfare system. We really, throughout the course of our research, we really came to believe in the mission of the foundation, and we thought that one of the best ways that we could present it is by creating a very easily digestible format for people to engage with this idea. So we're really happy to have been able to create that sort of project.
So we did have some areas of conflict that were obstacles to get over in creating this project, and finding solutions as the compromise for our deliverable. We originally pitched in our external project proposal, creating a zine. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a stylistic and creative kind of pamphlet used to disseminate information easily to the public. So our partner was pretty clear that they actually wanted an animation to present their message. And our group didn't really have significant animation experience or an access to that type of program. So we brainstormed and we talked, and we were able to find a way to do both of our original idea and what the partner wanted from us to satisfy their needs. And what we ended up coming up with was an interactive zine that has the video embedded. And if the partner wants to remove the video to have it stand on its own, that totally works too with the way that the video is created. And this allowed us to expand our research on COVID-19 while going into detail about generative welfare in the video specifically. And then Professor Convento helped us a lot actually to acquire the necessary program to make the video, and we ended up using a program called Video Scribe, and it ended up being fairly easy to learn, even with little experience, and we were able to proceed with both of the video and the zine from there. Another point of conflict was time differences. So our group had a considerable time difference with one of our group members living in Hawaii, and our partner obviously was in Italy, which is a considerable time difference. So we kind of just had to do our best to schedule meetings and write emails knowing when they would be, communicated back the next day. And there was a little language barrier, and something that helped was just getting on Zoom with our partner and talking to them. And we were able to consult both Elisabetta and the community partner for finding English translations of research that we needed, and to find some English sources as well. And that was pretty much it, as well as just some general communication and, academic burnout in the spring semester.
Yeah, so the ultimate decisions that we made throughout the course of this project was that our deliverable, as Carrie mentioned, was going to be a zine, which we further explained many of the issues that we studied in this class in terms of gender, race, and class, and how they affected Italy throughout the pandemic, and also how generative welfare could potentially serve as a solution for these problems. Yeah, it was just something that we are all very passionate about, and this is the process through which we use to make our project.
Yeah, so there were three main steps from coming to that decision for us to go forward with our project. The first was gathering research. This involved meeting with the community partner to learn more about generative welfare. Chris and Carrie actually sat down and had a really productive meeting where they were able to speak one-on-one and gain some more information about this idea because it was very new to all of us. And we also spoke with Professor Convento, who helped us find Italian sources. And on top of that, we did a lot of individual research, which we were able to talk to each other about as we sort of narrowed down the idea of what we wanted to present in our zine.
After that, we created an outline and presented our project to our class, our partner, and Elisabetta. And then we just had to learn to navigate and use Video Scribe and write our script for the video and match those up.
And the last step was actually working on and completing the deliverable. we made sure to divide the tasks in order to ensure that both the zine and the video were getting sufficient attention. And we regularly communicated about our progress on each. We had a group chat that we all pretty much talk in every day. So we're really close knit at this point. From there, we were able to remain on task using constant communication in the text group chat and regularly check in about the progress made on each component of the deliverable, and as well as check in on each other and make sure all of us are doing okay, make sure that the task at hand is feasible in that moment. If not, we were able to help each other. Now we can actually take a final look at the zine that we created and the animation. So once we hit the hyperlink.
Just bear with me for 1 second while I pull it up.
I also just put it in the chat, Jules. I don't know if it's possible to just view the slides a little bit bigger. I don't know if it's
I just saw that show up. I should absolutely be able to do that. My apologies.
No, thank you so much.
Oh, so sorry about that.
We can see them, don't worry. But I just think it would be easier for you also to explain the value of your work.
Okay, can everyone see that okay? And it's large enough?
I
Okay.
only see the deliverable slide.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't see the Canva screen right now.
We did see it for a second though, Jules.
Okay. Let me see if I stop the screen share for just 1 second and hop back in the specific window I have pulled up. That should hopefully fix. Did that solve it?
Yep, you can see it now.
Awesome. Okay, so we can get started on the zine.
So this is our zine. I also want to say thank you again to Professor Convento for providing almost all of the beautiful pictures you're about to see. It really made all of us want to take a trip to Italy once COVID passes over. The manifesto of the zine reads, "We aim to spread information about generative welfare and how useful it can be to societies that use it. We also aim to increase awareness of the disproportionate impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on marginalized communities. If we implement this construct, it can benefit both the disenfranchised individual and the society as a whole. This approach is unlike the top-down one that the US currently uses, and its unique benefits are important to recognize in the discussion of effective welfare systems." From there, we provide a brief introduction of our community partner, and then we jump into our discussion of generative welfare.
So our community partner does obviously a lot of research on generative welfare, which is a system of welfare that creates benefits for the community that the original welfare benefit is originally being given to. So this is resources for the community and for the individual, as opposed to a one-time payment from the government. So often a funded service that benefits the community.
Yeah, and from there, we jumped into our discussion of COVID-19, gender, and sexuality in Italy specifically. So while quarantine has provided queer people with a space for self-exploration, the LGBTQ community has also suffered considerable discrimination as the pandemic has progressed. So we pulled quotes from 3 major news sources about major LGBTQ issues that were happening during the pandemic in Italy. This first one is about feelings of depression and isolation in LGBTQ youth as they're trapped in unsafe home situations and the sort of lack of visibility they're getting in Italian media. We also talked about protests regarding a bill that would have made perpetrators of anti-LGBT violence face harsher penalties for their crimes. And sort of the feelings of like alienation and fear that can create in the queer community when they don't feel that they're being supported. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about Italy's coronavirus vaccine rollout and how it is potentially dangerous for trans folks. It's unnecessarily sex segregated, and that can force people out of the closet and put them in really dangerous or uncomfortable positions.
Yeah, so a lot of my interests in terms of my major and some of the other issues are sort of issues of like inequalities in political systems, and specifically, we wanted to take a look at how in the U.S. healthcare system we've seen like a lot of inequalities in terms of the COVID rollout, the COVID vaccine rollout, in terms of quality of care for many people. So we also want to analyze like Italy's approach to uh, the response to the pandemic in terms of how race has come into the picture with that. So yeah, so one of the largest aspects of racial inequality when it comes to Italy is the topic of migration. Due to its position in the Mediterranean, over a fifth of immigrants that come to Italy are of African origin. And throughout the course of the pandemic, many migrants were denied access to Italian towns by mayors who believed that they were contributing to the spread of the virus. However, to Italy's health minister stated the threat of migrants posed in the spread of COVID was minimal. So in particular, I found a lot of information about towns in Sicily that were stopping a large number of migrant ships that were coming onto the island, with the right-wing anti-immigration league, Lega Norda, party claiming that this was an invasion by migrants that spread COVID-19. However, the number of migrants did not uptick at an unreasonable way. One of the only issues that public health officials faced was the processing and quarantining of these migrants. So when they arrived in Italy, many of these migrants were much more susceptible to infection due to the conditions that they lived in while in the country. Many of the immigrants were forced to live in larger communities with lack of access to sanitation materials. Again, like this was not specifically a migrant issue, however, because 50% of the immigrants from to Italy of that year were from the EU. And this was specifically an issue for many of these groups of African immigrants who were trying to find a place in Italy. And there was a lot of mistreatment from in terms of differentiated treatment in terms of African immigrants and EU immigrants. Yeah, so as we mentioned, like in a lot of our papers up until this point, COVID has had like a huge economic impact, leaving countless of people jobless, homeless, and many businesses are struggling to recover. Basically, the wealth gap in many different countries are growing, middle class is shrinking, and in particular, these two groups have, in terms of like race and gender, have been disproportionately affected. We found studies showing that, in particular in America, LGBT households were more likely to suffer economic devastation due to COVID, and the same with households of color, especially African American households and Native American households. And on top of the issue of class, I think that one of the major solutions we found, it was what our partner focuses on, was generative welfare. So we have a short clip from our video that we wanted to show here that just elaborates essentially what generative welfare is through the use of 3 examples, and shows how this sort of frame of welfare can help these communities that we have been studying through our zine.
Look at some real-world examples that help us understand the concepts better. Say a man works in an industry heavily affected during the pandemic. He loses his job and his resources are drained trying to support himself. When he needs food, he goes to the local soup kitchen for dinner. This kitchen is funded by tax dollars and provides food to many in the community in a time of crisis. When he no longer needs the soup kitchen, he volunteers at the same place he had received food from. This is generative because it creates resources by staffing the local soup kitchen. The financial aid this community received allowed this individual to give back in a tangible way. Another example is an inmate at a local women's prison. Due to financial difficulties, she was not able to finish her high school degree or attend college. After being incarcerated for a minor crime, she finds out her prison has an educational program for prisoners to take classes towards earning a GED or associate's degree. She uses this degree to find a job helping at-risk youth in poor neighborhoods. This is generative because it allows former prisoners to find jobs after being incarcerated, rather than her relapsing into crime due to lack of job prospects from not having a high school or college degree. Not only that, it gives her the opportunity to help others in her community as well that are facing similar issues. The last example is a man who immigrated from Saudi Arabia to Italy. Initially, he found it difficult to earn money, but he was eligible for a government welfare program. This aid helps him find financial stability and gives him some more free time that he can use to give back to his community. He decides to teach Arabic at a local community college after work and on days off. This is generative because it creates the resource of a teacher for the local community. Many of his students go on to become interpreters or create connections with people in the Middle East.
Yeah, so basically, as you've seen through many of these examples, I think one of the best quotes that I found from the Foundation's research into this topic was the idea that we cannot help you without you. It essentially helps build a community in terms of providing them with the resources they need to thrive while also being able to help those around them. So if we want, Reese can go a little bit deeper into the process of making of this video.
Yeah, so I know that I haven't talked a whole lot from since the beginning of the presentation, but I kind of worked on the back on the video, and I have worked with less intuitive animation software. This software was super easy to use. It was very intuitive, and it was really, really fun to make. The video making process involved a lot of research in the script and being able to time it while also being able to use images that correctly communicate it in a concise way. It's easier said than done, to be quite honest, and someone that has some sort of aesthetic eye but can also keep it quick is hard to come by. I did resource a lot of the team. They helped so much on the script. I had a very, very well laid out script that pretty much told me what to put where. And what exactly was happening in the video. What you hear in the video right now was actually written out in a document. All I had to do was find the correct images to be able to convey the message that we had for this video. I had a really fun time working on this for our partner. Ultimately, in the beginning, I was a little bit resistant at making a video, just as someone who has had experience with animation software, but I loved using this. I loved using this program. It was really easy and fun to use, and especially that I could access the video from any device that I had. But back into the process, this short little clip, I think took about 8 hours for me to make in total, and I did have to use some cross application software. So I did have to also use iMovie to splice the video together. That's a little bit of the process that I went through in making this video.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure we thanked our partner one more time for these incredible examples we had to work with. These are all real world examples of people our partner has met and worked with. And so it was helpful for us as people who didn't have a lot of background knowledge on generative welfare to be able to hear these stories about these people and translate that into a video. It really helped our understanding of generative welfare. So this is the conclusion of our zine. Our last page says, COVID-19 has had a profound impact, especially across divisions of race, class, and gender, and spreading awareness about generative welfare is one step closer to providing aid for those communities made most vulnerable by this pandemic. And this is just our works cited. So I'm going to stop the share, and now that we're done with the deliverable, we can move into our Q&A section. If anyone has any questions about the topics we've discussed, about our process in making both of these really incredible creative projects, we'd love to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Side note, while we're waiting for some questions, I just realized that me and Jules are dressed almost identically.
I had the same thought, Chris.
Didn't we say that you guys were the mom and dad of the group? Like, wasn't that a thing that we had established?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time communicating in the group chat throughout the course of the entire semester. So I'm not surprised you guys are wearing the same thing.
Yeah. Most of our Zoom meetings in the beginning were kind of just chatting too. So
yeah.
So, and thank you guys for
oh, we do have a question. Sorry, Debbie.
I'm Debbie Miller with the Study Abroad Office. Wonderful presentation and great work. First of all, I may have missed this in the beginning, so my apologies if I did. Could either your group or could you give us an idea of what the format of the class was? Like, did all of the groups meet together in class? And then compare that, please, to sort of what work you did on your own. If you can kind of just frame the actual class for us a little bit more.
So I can frame the class for you. For the first, I think about 5 weeks, the whole class met together, all of the teams, and we did some cultural background work on Australia, Italy, and the United States that revolved around not only sort of the scaffolding of the general cultures themselves, but also on policy around race, around gender, and around healthcare. So that, and we broke it up between myself, Elisabetta and Mark, Elisabetta Convento and Mark Cannellan to teach those modules. And we found community partners for our 4 teams. And then after about week 6, the teams were really working directly with their community partner. We would gather at the beginning of a class, take temperature, and then they would go off and do the work that they needed to do. So they were pretty independent for the second half of the class. And then the teams, I'm sure every team had a different way in which they worked. They also, because there are 4 hub units, they also worked with Hutch Hutchinson and his group from Questrom. There's sort of the sub thing of this whole class is also on team building and organization and performance. So that's how the class was structured. And I imagine the various teams can tell you what their internal structure was like.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can speak to our perception of that a little bit. I think one thing our group found really helpful is that the start of this class, as Sharice said, was a lot of like lecture style. We got paired in our groups, we got to meet our community partners, start meeting people. We still had the structure of the lecture and all 3 professors speaking to us. And as the course went on, we sort of got a lot more freedom to work on our own, set our own timelines, sort of take apart that structure and find things that worked for us as we got more comfortable with each other as a group. So I really appreciated having that structure set for us at the beginning. And then as we sort of became more confident in what we were researching and became more confident in our teamwork with one another, we got to sort of set those boundaries for ourselves. So I think that's something that really worked for us.
Great. Any last questions? Oh, yes, Walter.
Wanted to say congratulations to you all. Greetings from DC with the DC program here. I know it's extremely challenging to have worked during the time of COVID virtually like this. So again, kudos to you guys for really putting something really nice together. Appreciate all the resources. I always look to see what resources you use as far as footnotes. Look like you guys did a really thorough job. So again, and I'm curious to see how you all, how the different teams worked on that end. But if you guys had worked in person, because a lot of the cross-college challenges, as you know, they actually work and they meet together. You guys had this extra hurdle of having to do this virtually. what would you guys do differently as far as if you had the added advantage of being able to work in person? How would you have approached things differently? Just out of curiosity.
Sorry, Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, you can go first, Reese.
Yeah. So I'm actually in Hawaii. I have a 6-hour time difference from the rest of my teammates. And I feel like if we were in person, we definitely would have been able to collaborate, I think, a little bit more on some projects like the animation. I'm doing that almost all on my own because one, I do have the most experience with animation software, and it is a little bit far out of everyone else's reach, and they've already been doing so much, and so that's kind of my thing. I also feel like we might have had a different connection if we met in person. We all connected super easily over Zoom, so I don't think that would have been an issue, but I think it would have been a different kind of chemistry. And I think the third thing would be that we would have been able to organize a lot more meetings. While we did have pretty frequent ones, I think, for our team, we did have one, I think we had at least one for every couple of class meetings, at least, if not more. But I think we would have been able to do that more had we been in the same time zone to coordinate that.
Yeah, I agree with everything Reese said. I think that overall, I'm very proud of the group for adapting for this circumstance, because I know a lot of people who have been really burned out by like Zoom classes, and I think that the opportunity to be able to like work online was partially helpful because we were able to like work around each other's schedules rather than having to meet up. We could just like arrange a meetup at like the GSU or like somewhere on campus. We were able to sort of just find a time that worked the best for us to sit down and like get our sort of like get our stuff done. I'd say if I had to change anything, or if it would change anything in terms of our approach, I think honestly, yeah, I feel like I probably would have. I think that just meeting more in person would be like a lot more helpful, because we did really get to know each other well, but like I think that meeting people over Zoom is just a little difficult.
All right, thank you so much, team. I think that was a great presentation. We're going to move on so that we stay on pace here. So we're going to move on to team C. I know you think it'd go A, B, C, D, but we're taking the worldwide time zone thing into consideration. So we're going on to team C, which worked with the National Collaborative of Health Equity, for health equity. And so team C, step up to the plate.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to begin with sharing my screen, and my group and I can get started. Okay, just want to confirm that you can see that. Okay, thank you, Sharice. I see your head nod. So as you guys know, this class investigated the intersection of COVID-19, healthcare, and race in the United States. And my group would like to begin just by introducing ourselves and giving a brief educational background. My name's Regan. I'm a junior in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm studying neurobiology with a minor in public health and political science. And I was interested in this class, and particularly what we researched, because I have aspirations to join the medical field. And I found it particularly interesting to see how COVID-19 had various implications in our society.
So hi, I'm Jessie, and I'm a sophomore student with major of public relations and minor in entrepreneur. And I joined this class to explore my interest in how the pandemic is treating people around the world, and how specifically how some people are being treated differently.
Hello, I'm Will. I'm a sophomore in computer science and statistics with a minor in sociology. I joined this class because not only was I really interested in how COVID, income, and race were all like intersecting, but also like how researchers use certain statistical methods to show certain societal trends and data, and how you can use statistics to represent sociological kind of theories and methods.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm majoring in human physiology with a potential minor in public health. I was initially drawn to this class because, as a lot of us have already said, I was really interested in exploring health equities, especially as those that were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I knew as well that in my project for this class, I want to explore that as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah. I'm a biology major and a psychology minor, and I'm also a junior. I took this class because I'm also interested in healthcare and wanted to explore the intersectionality of that.
Thanks, guys. So through our presentation, we wanted to walk you through the timeline that we stepped through throughout the semester and the stepping stones that got us to our final project. So in the beginning of the semester, we were able to meet as a team and discuss our project options. And I'm going to let Hannah take over from here.
Great. So in the beginning of the semester, we focused a lot on teamwork in February and March to, get to know each other as a team. And at first we wrote out our individual project proposals where we outlined what we each wanted to accomplish this semester. And after being grouped together, we discussed the similarities and differences between our individual project proposals. And we were able to come to a consensus of what we wanted to explore. So we then formed the internal project proposal, and we were able to meet with our community partner to listen to their missions and goals. And we combined these to make our external project proposal, where we concluded the initial planning of our project and the first weeks of the semester. So talking about kind of where we are all situated, Regan, Will, Anna, and I are all on campus in Boston, while Jesse is in Taiwan. So we wanted to make sure to accommodate this, keeping in mind that 12-hour time difference. And we primarily use Zoom to meet and collaborate on the assignments that were due, but we also used WhatsApp to communicate. So WhatsApp was used to make sure we were all on the same page, and we also talked about what tasks we needed to accomplish by the next time we met. And our team was also able to use this to ask for help if anyone needed anything, any assistance on individual assignments. Google Calendar was used to plan the meetings for Zoom, which was mentioned in our team contract earlier. And we said that we would all talk about the assignment and check it off before submitting it together, so we were all on the same page.
Thank you, Hannah. So as Hannah mentioned, we got to meet our community partner early in the semester and were able to amend our external project proposal to reflect the goals of the National Collaborative for Health Equity and their sister project, the HOPE Initiative. So through the HUB XC program, we were able to partner with the NCHE. They were founded in 2014 to promote health equity through action, leadership, inclusion, and collaboration. Health equity, in their view, requires creating the conditions that foster the best possible health for all populations, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, or nativity. And within the NCHE, we were fortunate to use data and information from their renowned HOPE Initiative. The HOPE Initiative provides an interactive data tool designed to help states and the country move beyond measuring disparities to spurring on action towards health equity. HOPE tracks social determinants of health and health outcomes by race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. Indicators were organized into 5 domains, 1 for health outcomes and 4 domains that influenced longevity and well-being. Their unique analysis uses an opportunity framework to set aspirational but achievable goals to improve life outcomes. And so one of the most compelling aspects of the HOPE Initiative that Dr. Gail Christopher emphasized in our team meetings with us was the distance to goal. And the distance to goal shows how much progress the nation and each state must take to achieve the HOPE goal on a particular indicator overall by race and ethnicity. And so when we began to conduct research for our project, the information within the HOPE initiative and distance to goal was particularly telling when assessing regional differences between manifestations of inequality and how COVID impacted that. And so, as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic swept the world off of its feet in March of 2020 and unarguably devastated the lives of millions, touching individuals through the loss of loved ones, interrupted educational plans, hindering employment in an unprecedented way. And as we have discussed, this has brought existing disparities to light, making hidden inequities blatantly obvious and incredibly painful for society to cope with. After meeting with Dr. Gail Christopher and learning about the mission of the NCHE, we were able to develop our research question that the rest of our project was developed around. And in this, we proposed the question of how does race, income, and media in the United States intersect with COVID-19 and vaccine distribution?
To effectively answer our overarching question, we created a few team goals. Firstly, we had to familiarize ourselves with the current research and data on COVID-19, race, healthcare, income, media, and food insecurity in the United States. We made sure to read and analyze research and data that focused on the interactions between these topics. Secondly, we decided to split these topics into 5 separate podcast episodes to give structure to our podcast and research. And lastly, we wanted to reach a young adult audience and inspire our listeners to make a positive impact in their communities. And since none of us had experience with podcasting before this, we decided to work hard to finish our research in a timely manner, which you will see in the next part of our timeline. We split up the research equally so that each person would find at least one scientific article or study that they found insightful for each topic. Then the podcast leader would consolidate and summarize the research for their respective topics, so each person could quickly learn the most vital aspects of each topic. We began heavily researching on the 1st of April and finished our annotated bibliography on the 7th. So it really was a quick process. And then each podcast leader began consolidating research and scripting their respective episodes on the 10th. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a podcast and failed with COVID-19, and we podcast is an easily accessible. These podcasts are timed around 12 to 22 minutes with interesting focus that is digestible to college student like us. And in our first episode, we talk about the effect of race. In the second, we focus on the intersections of food insecurity. In the third, we highlight the healthcare inequality and income disparities. In the fourth, we mentioned how media portrayal of the pandemic is affecting Asian American community. And finally, in our last episode, talking about the state.
Okay, so as you see, we're already nearing the end of our timeline. So as Will was talking about, the episode leaders did begin drafting their scripts. And after drafting those scripts, we began filming the podcast as a team. After recording our first podcast, we sent that to our community partner for feedback. And after receiving that feedback, we used that for our future podcasts and for our future filming. So podcast filming was definitely a work in progress. Most of us have not had experiences recording podcasts, filming podcasts, or even scripting these kinds of podcasts. So we did meet with Noah Eberhardt, who is a BU alumni who has a podcast of his own. And he gave us very valuable advice, including incorporating external media into our podcast. So that can include various things such as interviews, videos, or in the case of podcasts, just the audio part of it. And so we incorporated those into our scripts as well. So based on our individual scripts, we did come together and edit our scripts as a whole. And we incorporated each of those things into it. Because we were a group of 5, we decided that it would be difficult to not script and have kind of we wanted to avoid anyone talking over each other. So we did draft scripts up to avoid that problem for our filming.
Thank you, Anna. So as we move towards the end of the semester, basically the past 2 weeks, we were fortunate enough to have Will do all of the editing for the podcasts. And in the meantime, we worked on drafting a poster that we could link all of our podcasts to and use that as something to disseminate the podcast to the general population. Within the poster, which we'll show you on the next slide, we have a brief synopsis and then all of the bibliography with all of the resources we used. A lot of research went into this and we needed to give credit where credit was due. We did have one last team check-in with Charisse to prep this presentation and go over any last minute details, which has led us to our presentation here now. And I'm going to have Hannah send you guys the PDF in the chat. You'll be able to download it and explore the different episodes. In the meantime, we would like to share a short snippet of podcast 1, which is where I was the episode leader and we discussed the disproportionate effect of COVID-19 on racial minorities in the United States. With this, I think we can unpack some of the ideas Dr. Kendi introduced in the interview.
So a couple of those ideas would be good adult health status is central to happiness, well-being, and economic productivity. In 98% of the US, white people are closer to adult health status goal compared to Black people and other minority groups.
Ooh. My apologies. I don't know what's going on with our presentation. Stand by. Okay, I'm going to replay the podcast here. With this, I think we can unpack some of the ideas Dr. Kendi introduced in the interview.
So a couple of those ideas would be good adult health status is central to happiness, well-being, and economic productivity. In 98% of the US, white people are closer to adult health status goal compared to Black people and other minority groups. Manifestations of adult health status can be seen in the disproportionate rates of COVID-19 comorbidities between racial groups.
Now let's unpack access to healthcare. Adult health status is another metric of the HOPE initiative and is also complicated by unequal access to healthcare. People who have health insurance have an easier time accessing healthcare and experience better health outcomes than those without any health insurance. Similar to adult health status, white Americans consistently rank higher in access to healthcare. This idea is particularly salient because it can contribute to the continued distrust of the medical community, higher rates of comorbidities due to inconsistent access to medical care, and ultimately higher rates of COVID-19 morbidity and mortality.
Thanks, Anna and Hannah. We can see, just as quickly as COVID-19 swept through the world and our nation, a new body of scientific, epidemiological, and sociological research has emerged to elucidate the stark disparities of COVID-19 vulnerability, morbidity, and mortality.
So one study evaluated the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black people compared to white people in the United States. These studies adjusted for race, age, comorbidities, and socioeconomic factors. Even with these adjustments, there was still a significantly high rate of morbidity and mortality within the Black populations. Here are what we found in the research. U.S. counties that are majority Blacks have 3 times the rate of infection and almost 6 times the rate of death as counties where white residents are in the majority. The Center of Disease Control noted that while Black constitutes 18% of the population, they represent 33% of the COVID hospitalized populations. In the New York City, Black people represent 22% of the population but accounted for 28% of the death. The COVID-19 mortality rate for Black was higher than the rate of Indigenous, Latin, non-Hispanic, white, and Asian. The age-adjusted COVID-19 mortality rate indicates that the mortality rate for Black was 3.4 times higher than the rate for non-Hispanic white. The finding in the study will be useful to show how unequal access to care, increased social vulnerability, a lack of patients' agency to self-advocate in a medical setting, and scarce resources manifest into poor clinical outcomes.
Thanks, Jessie. Another study reports COVID-19 mortality was higher among non-Hispanic Blacks compared with non-Hispanic whites. due to more non-Hispanic Blacks holding essential worker positions. Vulnerability to coronavirus exposure was increased among non-Hispanic Blacks, who disproportionately occupied the top 9 essential occupations. Although many states have implemented stay-at-home orders in an attempt to contain COVID-19's rapid spread, many essential workers were unable to remain at home, disproportionately affecting non-white individuals. I think this is particularly important to discuss because I know my parents were fortunate enough to transition to a work from home capacity, and it's important to recognize that this is not possible for all occupations. For example, my mom is a professor at SUNY Buffalo, and in this capacity, she transitioned to teaching completely online and conducted all of her classes remotely. In a similar sense, my father is a district attorney for the county, and he also transitioned to online. With this, both of them were able to live out the stay-at-home orders and work from home.
In my case, my father was able to transition from in person to completely online. However, my mom, having comorbidities for COVID-19, chose to stop working because of the fact that her workplace did not transition to being completely online.
So my mom is an office assistant and she works on top of a bakery. And so it's a pretty small company. And so she actually had to work in person during the entire pandemic from basically start to now. Although she is 65 and technically in the at-risk category, she did not have a choice and she was chosen as one of the people that had to go in. To be fair, her office was fairly empty, for she was one of the only people that had to work. But it was really inconvenient circumstances because of her age.
So in my case, both my parents are dentists in Taiwan, and they are not able to work from home. And so they have been working physically since the first day of the pandemic. And I think what makes that possible is that we have very little cases in Taiwan.
Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that brief snippet of the podcast. I encourage you all to check out the remainder of episode 1 and the 4 subsequent episodes where my peers lead their own discussions on the relevant topics. Overall, reflecting on this experience, I think it was very positive, and I was fortunate to work with an excellent group. In our group chat today, we were reflecting on our favorite memories from the semester, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to learn and work with the professors as well.
Okay, does anybody, thank you so much, Team C, that was a great presentation. Does anybody have any questions for this group? Oh, Laura. Laura, did you have a question? Oh, that was a clap. It's so hard to. Gareth has a question.
Thanks, Charisse, and thank you to everyone. That was a great presentation, as was the previous one. A question for you about some of the people who you were talking about, the groups that you're talking about as having differential health outcomes. How might you seek to communicate some of what you've learned to them using the podcast or other tools, so that it's not just those who are thinking about it from an academic or an abstract perspective, but really the communities that are impacted directly as well?
That's a good question. I can start, and then my team members can jump in. So when we were thinking about designing the podcast, our target audience, after conversation with Dr. Gail Christopher with the National Collaborative, was college-age students. And so when we created the podcast, although you didn't hear it in the snippet we played with, we worked to inspire change at the end of it. We tried to end each episode with a call to action, a way to donate, help, or learn more, which I thought was a very positive addition to some very startling statistics. With Dr. Christopher, she reminded us of how challenging it can be to hear very negative statistics when you're a person in these communities that are adversely affected. So she did inspire us to end on a note of optimism. in regards to your question about getting this information to the affected communities, although that wasn't the goal of our particular project, I know that there were plans to use this podcast on the National Collaborative website and for it to be widely accessible for those interested in learning more and, taking the first step towards that goal.
If I can add, sorry, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to add, yes, the target audience is college students, but soon enough, we will be going out and, finding jobs and going out into the field on our own. And hopefully some of us will be working with these communities and kind of reaching out, having these statistics in mind and trying to remedy these disparities and actually bring it into action in the field when we do graduate and end up entering the career world.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Regan said earlier about how we tried to add some sort of call to help at the end of each podcast. So my podcast was on how media portrayal of COVID-19 affected Asian Americans. And I definitely made sure to include at the end, what you can do to support AAPI community right now. And I included websites that you could report instances of anti-Asian acts to. I also talked about how you can donate to GoFundMes for victims of Asian hate crimes and other organizations. So yeah, that was definitely an important takeaway. We wanted to make sure to let our listeners know what they could do about each of the issues that we talked about.
Thank you very much, Olivia.
Do we have any other questions? Thanks very much, team. And so we're going to move on now to Team D, who also worked with the National Collaborative for Health Equity. They did a different type of project for them. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Team D.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm just trying to figure out sharing my screen. That'll just take 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, can you guys see the screen? Yes? Okay.
Hello, everybody. We are Team D, and our project innovation is a social media toolkit, a personalized guide to social media in the age of COVID-19, working with the National Collaborative Health Equity. So to begin, we're just going to do some introductions, and I'll start. My name is Maxwell Fisher, and I'm majoring in philosophy and political science in the School of the College of Arts and Sciences.
Hi, I'm Caroline Fernandez. I'm a senior majoring in international relations with a concentration in regional politics and cultural anthropology and a dual minor in women's studies and the core curriculum.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isa Valinsky. I'm an advertising major and political science minor.
Hi, I'm Itondo. I'm majoring in economics and minor in statistics.
Hi everyone, my name is Winnie. I'm a rising junior majoring in chemistry and minoring in public health.
So to give an outline of our presentation, we're first going to begin by talking about our community partner, the National Collaborative for Health Equity, aka NCHE. And then after that, we're going to talk about how we work with this organization to basically create our social media toolkit. And the two core objectives are our preliminary social media research, which basically informed how we decided to carry out this toolkit. And then we're going to talk about the toolkit overview and its contents. So that includes what's actually in the toolkit and kind of our research areas with that. And the focus areas and how it intersects with race, gender, and socioeconomic status. Those three areas included food insecurity, which is actually pushed by the National Collaborative for Health Equity, as that's a campaign that they were working on. The next one that we decided to do is infection rates, as that's a big topic, especially during this pandemic. And then lastly, vaccine distribution, especially with the recent distributions of vaccines across the United States. And at the end of it, we'll just give you a brief conclusion and debrief. So just a brief description of our community partner, the National Collaborative for Health Equity. They're a DC-based organization established in 2014. We work with the executive director, who's Dr. Gail C. Christopher, and the program manager, Jaleesa Whitley. And their main objective is to basically to promote health equity through action, leadership, inclusion, and collaboration. And we wanted to kind of center that mission and include it in our social media toolkit to kind of just talk about the many inequities that exist today. And their three main pillars and working with them include racial healing and racial equity, research and data-driven policy and practice, and leadership for health equity. And like I said before, they were working on a food inequity campaign. So our overall goal in working with them is to improve their social media branding in the context of health equity, COVID-19, and social justice. We decided to do this with the social media toolkit because we noticed that the social media aspect of their organization was just kind of lacking. So then we decided to provide a social media toolkit. So our project proposal includes a toolkit, and our overall objective is basically to explore COVID-19 health inequities in terms of race, gender, socioeconomic status. And we want to utilize social media as a way to not only combat these issues, but to emphasize the inequities of these issues and to provide resources. So this is our deliverable to the NCHE. So regarding our preliminary research, this is basically contains social media and COVID-19. We had to ask ourselves, how has COVID-19 affected social media use? So the first key component is that the fact that there are 10 million more active social media users in the US since January 20th. Another key fact was that 53% of Americans get their news from social media, with Facebook as the most common. And lastly, 97.2% of total social media users access it via mobile. So with our post and how we decided to construct them, we decided to just make 3 posts, and basically we decided to have them be used for any application, because we understand that posts are not only shared on their actual application, but they get shared from app to app. So maybe from Facebook to Instagram, or Instagram to Twitter, etc. So the next question we asked ourselves is, how can social media be an effective tool for social change? And that is through community building and collective resilience. By providing this toolkit and providing some structure of information that can be packaged and distributed to people so that they can be informed, it builds a sense of community, it builds a sense of resilience, and it collectively informs communities across America on the many inequities that we are facing today in this pandemic. And lastly, we decided to look at past social media platforms that have encouraged offline action. Over the summer, as many of us know, the Black Lives Matter movement was very prominent. And a big way that they got their message out was by utilizing social media. So a social media toolkit overview, what is it? So in partnering with the NCHE, we created a guidebook. And in this guidebook, we decided to basically give advice on how to utilize social media to communicate about the inequities. So what it contains includes, like I said before, 3 sample posts, content layout, and guidelines. The content layout and guidelines will basically help the NCHE in sustaining any approach to social media that they might go about. So we included 3 sample posts for them, just as a way to just kind of kickstart their social media use. And our research overview of our 3 main areas of interest include food insecurity, infection rates, and vaccine distribution.
Okay. So the first part of creating our social media toolkit is looking at how current social media platforms are being used as a tool for change and what features they have that make them a successful tool. So one thing that we did was that we performed a case study analysis on the social media platforms for Black Lives Matter, particularly their Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and how they were used during the period of COVID-19. And we used that to kind of decide what actions the NCHE should take to create an engaging social media presence. We chose to focus on Black Lives Matter because we believe that BLM and the NCHD have similar backgrounds and goals to reduce racial disparities in health, community, and the workplace. In addition, the content that BLM posts create is very educational and proactive, and we believe that the NCHD would benefit from having that as well. And by analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of the BLM social media platforms, we hope to find ways to improve the branding of the NCHD and optimize its content engagement. So the first piece of advice comes from the overall appearance of the social media page. So as you can see with the BLM Instagram, they use a specific set of colors in their profile picture as well as in their graphics, which are the colors yellow, white, and black. And by using the same colors throughout their social media page, it creates a very cohesive brand image and makes the page seem more eye-catching. So one way that the NCHE can implement that into their social media platform is perhaps by using the colors of their logo, which are navy, orange, purple, green, and gray, and incorporating that into their graphics. So the next piece of advice would be pertaining to the types of graphics that are created. So in order to call for social change, the posts need to target a specific audience using clear messaging. So as you can see in the first graphic to the left, it is highlighting small Black-owned businesses, many of which had to reduce work or shut down during the pandemic. And the second one on the right was created in response to the Capitol riots. And even though both posts touch on different topics, the overall theme is to improve the livelihood of minority communities. And they use very specific words that are targeted toward a particular audience, one of which is an audience that is hoping for social change. And so the one way that NCHE can apply that is by also using kind of minimal words and images in their graphics as well. And the third piece of advice we have is consistent content schedule. So making sure that you know what you're posting and when you're posting is important so you can kind of design your post in advance. One thing that we noticed that the BLM platform did during the month of March, which is Women's History Month, was that they used their platform to highlight strong and powerful Black women. And they would post this campaign every 2 to 3 days to kind of further spread this message that they had, which was Black women are divine. So if the NCHD wants to kind of have a similar platform to highlight an issue that they're passionate about, for example, like food distribution, then they should have a similar content schedule. And the fourth piece of advice that we have, which was mentioned by Maxwell earlier, which is cross-platform usage and transferable content. So as you can see here, the Black Lives Matter movement, their social media platforms have a very consistent profile picture, cover photo, as well as username. And this is especially important because it emphasizes the cohesive brand image. And according to a social media data report by the Hootsuite, at least 98% of users on any social media platform also use at least one other platform as well, which is why it's important that anything that you do post on one platform is the same as what you would post on any other platform. And in addition, content that you would post perhaps on Twitter doesn't have to just stay on Twitter. You can also put it on Instagram as well. So as you can see on the bottom right, for example, a tweet made by Black Lives Matter, they also use it as a graphic for Instagram as well. Yeah, and just as important as the graphics are, the captions are also an important part of the post. So the caption should be creative and concise. And one way a caption can be created is by making cultural references. So as you can see on the top left, it makes a reference to a very famous Broadway musical, Hamilton. And it's important to note that when making cultural references, it's important to keep in mind that they should be made because they align with the values of the organization and not because they're quote unquote trendy for the current age. So one way that the partnership with Hamilton and Black Lives Matter was very fitting was because they both showed how communities of color were kind of reshaping how history unfolds in America, which is why this partnership was very fitting. And it's also important to tag partnering organizations and include relevant hashtags when making captions. However, as you look on the bottom right of the post, you see another one. This also makes a cultural reference. It's pointing towards, former President Obama. He made a criticism of snappy slogans, and Black Lives Matter kind of like created this post in response to that. And one thing that you notice the difference between the post referencing Hamilton and the post about defund the police is its length and structure. So the post with Hamilton is definitely much more structured and much more articulate, whereas the post for defund the police is much shorter and it's not even a full sentence. So definitely an important thing to keep in mind when creating captions is having that balance between being concise, but also giving context as well. And the sixth and last piece of advice is probably the most important piece of advice, which is offline action. So one of the things that makes Black Lives Matter a very successful social media platform is that it's able to encourage their audience to take action beyond their page. So beyond just liking a post or commenting or tweeting, it's able to get its audience to take action beyond that. And so one way that they even do that is by encouraging people to vote. So as we've seen in the past graphics, as well as the graphic on the left, they've made many posts leading up to the election to encourage people to vote. And because of that, the previous election had a record high voter turnout. Another example of offline action that Black Lives Matter does, and something that perhaps the NCHD could also implement, is encouraging people to sign petitions. This one in the middle is focused on demilitarizing our neighborhoods. And another type of offline action that the BLM does is the creation of a survival fund. And an important part of offline action is transparency. So not only should organizations encourage offline action, but they should also highlight the results of these actions so that the audience will be more encouraged to continue them in the future. Overall, these are just a sample of the social media advice that we've compiled for the NCHD. Our toolkit definitely has more specific guidelines in terms of the graphics and the captions that we've created for them.
So now a big key in part of this is transferring all of the valuable research that we've done into our real life examples. We've now collected all of this data over the course of the semester, and it was a bit of heavy research, but we've now transferred what we learned about social media consumption, and aesthetics into these content regions and how we will be delivering this information in a way that is accessible to people of all different backgrounds. And again, just to restate, the focus areas that we elected to concentrate on are food insecurity, infection rates, and vaccine distribution. And at this point, we will show you the graphics that we created and the corresponding captions and how the National Collaborative may opt to use these in the future to deliver information on these valuable topics relating to COVID-19. So first, we talked a lot in the past about the research that we've done, and we've discovered that graphics, layout, and guidelines are really important. So we're going to address now, how did we transform this extensive research material into captivating social media content? So as you can see, we've carried over the theme of the cohesiveness of using certain colors that coincide with what the organization itself utilizes in their graphics. And here on the right, you will see the graphic that we created for food insecurity. It has a brief caption that shows you just a flash of information about the topic. 1 in 3 households have experienced food insecurity since the beginning of COVID-19. And on the left is a bit more information about the topic of food insecurity itself and how the problem has progressed over the course of the pandemic. And these are all things that could be included in a more brief way in a caption for this type of information. Continuing on, we focused on infection rates, and as is shown here, there are a lot of discrepancies among Black, Indigenous people of color in terms of cases, hospitalizations, and death. And we think that this is something that's valuable to deliver to the public because people can be more aware of their risk in terms of contracting the virus. And given that we've found people are spending so much time on their phone, social media can be like the great equalizer here, and it can serve as a way for people to get more information and to react appropriately. So the graphic that we've elected to show here on the right shows that 178 in 100,000 people is the COVID-19 death rate for people, compared to 124 in, I'm sorry, my box here on the left, 124 in 100,000 for white people. So that's a big discrepancy. Next, we concentrated on vaccine distribution, and this in particular is extremely valuable at this point in the pandemic when we're trying hard to get people vaccinated. And we've found through our research on the virus itself and how it's impacted different communities differently, is that kind of equal to what we were talking about in terms of infection rates. People from different groups are being vaccinated at different rates. And I'm sure any of us here can testify to the fact that if you log onto Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you see people posting that they've gotten their vaccine. And we think that this could be a really successful way to deliver more information combating misinformation campaigns that are prevalent right now with regards to the vaccine. So our research has demonstrated essentially that social media is a great platform from which to deliver these facts and encourage the population to get the vaccine. And on the right, you will see a graphic that shows a statistic saying 1 in 4 white people have been vaccinated as compared to only 13 to 15% of Black, Indigenous people of color. And we could continue in the caption to say providing resources for people to get vaccinated, how to sign up, just more information on how to combat these things directly. So to give a brief overview of this entire project, our proposal was to create a social media toolkit for the National Collaborative because we noticed in our research on the organization itself, it seemed that they were lacking in terms of a social media presence. And we found that having a stark social media presence will actually work not only in the favor of the organization, but in the favor of eliminating these inequities that the virus itself has underscored. So we've given an overview on our research in relation to these 3 relevant focus areas. We've provided a content layout and guidelines. We've given some sample posts. We concentrated on food distribution, infection rates, and vaccine distribution. And some of the challenges that we found in coordinating amongst ourselves is just overseeing the different stages of this project and its development. That includes communicating amongst each other, communicating with the organization. There's challenges in just kind of finding a direction at points when you have a lot of different people who are like having maybe different opinions on which way to take the project. But I think that in the long run, we found a really good way to bring all of these ideas together in a cohesive way. We had some issues in terms of time zones and adherence to the strict guidelines that not only the class created for us, but that we wanted to hold ourselves to. So we didn't have to make a bit of tweaking as we went along so that we could all reasonably abide by these guidelines, but it did end up working out in our favor in the end. And just in terms of settling, again, directional disputes among ourselves. But I think that in the long run, we were able to tie everything together pretty successfully. So that is the end of our presentation. And depending on what time allows for, I was thinking we might be able to just briefly scroll through the actual concrete toolkit itself to give you an overview of what it looks like, if that's something that you guys are interested in. But regardless, we'd like to extend our gratitude to you guys for listening to us and to the organization for believing in our direction that we wanted to take this in for them.
Thanks so very much. Can we take a moment to open it up for questions? I'm the person like doing the rundown and clocking time. So we want to make sure that all the groups have enough time. Does anyone have any questions for this team? Hello? Are there any questions? I'm going to ask a question. So, you know, this was a fairly open-ended challenge at the beginning of the course. How did you all decide to delve into social media and in particular a social media toolkit? It seems like it set you up for sort of two pillars of research on the topic itself and then on the efficacy of social media. So what sort of steered you guys into that direction?
I think I can start to answer that, and then if anybody else from the group wants to jump in. I think that just given the prevalence as we've seen through our research that we talked about, and just if you reference like college students in general, a lot of people are spending a lot of time on their phones, and with a lot of the movements that we've seen going on recently, Stop Asian Hate, Black Lives Matter, seeing these posts being circulated online, and a lot of it having to do with aesthetics and just cutting down research into a really like accessible, brief, like popping like way. I think that that's something that caught our attention as we learned more about the organization and found that they didn't have as much of a social media presence, and just seeing firsthand from our interactions on social media how successful that can be. And we thought that it would be really great to kind of marry those two ideas and bring together like building upon our research skills and also being able to create like these aesthetically pleasing and informational graphics to circulate online.
Yeah, and to also continue off of that, one of our main approaches was just finding out how to balance like being so involved in the subject, which is important to us, which is health inequities among different racial identities and gender identities. And it was just also kind of asking ourselves, how can we create this like universality, like innovation to kind of like help any cause, you know, for the National Collaborative of Health Equity.
Yeah, and just going off what Maxwell was saying in terms of our process, originally we wanted to create a campaign. We've all kind of had to learn how to be adaptable during this COVID pandemic. And so we eventually switched the toolkit, which has worked even better for our idea.
And also giving a toolkit allows the organization to have some freedom in terms of if they want to tweak certain things, if they want to just reference what our thought process was behind creating the specific graphics and then maybe run with that with the teams that they have in existence. We thought that might be a great way to just kind of bring together our research and just possible graphics if they did choose to use them in the future.
Elizabeth has a question.
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank this team as all the others, but I also wanted to say that the more we continue with this presentation, the more I feel like, maybe it's just myself, that they are truly intersecting and they just open up for, you know, a lot of possibilities using social media, using the same themes that are, you know, regarding, of course, the course is about this, but it also means that you have made the course very successful, as you have been all discussing about these very important topics. I just see a lot of potential also for a collaboration among teams for future projects, you know, that could be very enriching for communities. And again, you are bringing the concept of diversity to its full, you know, an extensive meaning by working the way you did. I just wanted to thank you all. I will be thanking the fourth team. I don't want to, you know, anticipate what they will do. I'm really curious, but at the same time, I'm really appreciating all your presentations. They're wonderful. Great job.
Yes, and I just wanted to add very quickly, I added the toolkit itself into the chat since we didn't have a chance to kind of look over it with a fine tooth comb if anybody's interested in looking over what the components of the actual toolkit itself are.
Thanks so very much. If there are no more questions for this team, we're going to get to our last team, Team B, who is working with Aboriginal Community Services. I'm going to let Mark.
Yeah, look, I would echo what Elizabeth has just said, and I think it's really, really key to sort of build on what you've achieved. And I just wanted to introduce, by way of, and actually reflect a little bit on what we've seen today, build a little bit on that, but introduce my team in terms of the tasks that they had to perform. One of the interesting things about dealing with Aboriginal people in Australia is that arguably we're dealing with the oldest continuing civilization on Earth as a group. At the same time, we're dealing with a group that don't want to be positioned as that and only that. So they want continuity, but they also want to be involved in change around their group. So that's a really difficult thing. Also, they're a very small group. Numerically in Australian population, 3%. And they're used to being kind of considered to be outsiders, to be fringe dwellers in the community. And so what's really evolved over time, and this is what our students have learned, is that they've tended to do things for themselves, and they've found strength within their own group, and they've done things for themselves. So there's a reticence when a group from outside the Aboriginal community come to them. There's a natural reticence in dealing with an outside group. And so we had to overcome that initial reticence. And the way you overcome that is, there's an Aboriginal slogan that's doing the rounds at the moment, which is really key to all of this. And the words are, nothing about us without us, nothing about us without us. So basically what you have to tap into with Aboriginal people is they love to tell stories. They're a story-based culture in many ways, and even in the contemporary setting, they love to tell their stories. So what we had to do was find a way for stories to be told. Now, I don't want to go too far into this because I'm preempting the group, but there was an untold story, which was a very powerful one, and I'm going to let the group talk about what that untold story was. Reflecting on the three presentations so far, the generative welfare is definitely a part of the Aboriginal setup. It really is something that they do within their own group in a huge way. And so when we started to look at which community-based partners we would have, all of the groups we spoke to want to be partners. They all want to be part of what we've been doing. And they're interested in what we're doing because they want to tell their stories. When it came to group 2 with the podcasting, definitely a podcast is a great vehicle for telling a story. So that's why the group decided to go down that path. And then finally, the presentation on social media platforms, the importance of aesthetics and messaging has really played out within the Aboriginal community here in Australia, and the consistency, the branding, if you like, if you want to use that word, has really been an important thing, both to reach older populations and younger populations. And so along the way, we found, that there'd been music videos made about COVID, all sorts of things had happened, and the posters were very colourful and really spoke to Aboriginal art in many ways as well. Anyway, I'm probably preempting way too much, but the group had to find their way through this initial reticence, and I believe they have. So I look forward to seeing their presentation. No pressure.
Just give me 1 minute so I can share my screen. Can everybody see it? Are we good? Okay.
Okay, so hi everybody, we are Team A and we did our project on how COVID-19 has impacted the Aboriginal community in Australia. So we'll just start off by quickly introducing ourselves. We have students in many different types of majors, so I'll start. My name is Tara and I'm a junior studying international relations.
Hi everyone, I'm Diana and I'm a junior studying biology.
Hi, I'm Coralie. I'm a junior studying political science and economics.
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I am a senior studying English and political science.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor, and I'm a senior studying psychology.
And finally, I'm Jacob, a sophomore studying political science.
With COVID deaths rising over 3 million globally, it's really clear that the pandemic has been an issue that has affected millions of people across the world in a variety of different ways. Minority communities have also been disproportionately affected. Given this and the fact that historically Australian Aborigines have suffered greater effects from disease outbreaks, such as H1N1, we wanted to research the effects of COVID-19 on Aboriginal populations. However, throughout the pandemic, there have been 0 recorded COVID deaths in Aboriginal communities. So instead, our project is exploring the successes that Aboriginal communities have had in handling the pandemic. And it involves a number of interviews with people working within the Aboriginal community.
So to provide some background information, in Australia, the Aboriginal community makes up of 3.3% of the total population. And the Aboriginal community has always had greater health comorbidities and lower life expectancies as a result. It was about 9 years for females and 10 years for males, shorter than the average white Australian. And despite these challenges and the general obstacles with getting access to health services in more rural areas, the Aboriginal community has actually experienced amazing success with COVID-19. Since the beginning of the pandemic, only 149 cases as of, I believe, April 12th were reported amongst the Indigenous population and no deaths were reported. And then COVID-19 in general in Australia has been fairly controlled due to them quickly closing off their borders. However, there have been problems with the vaccine rollout. Less than 5% of its population has been vaccinated as of April 12th. And while Australia has received and given Pfizer doses, their original plan for vaccine rollout included mainly AstraZeneca vaccines, but as most of you guys have probably heard, there have been cases of blood clots with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So there's a bit of a pause on that plan, and Australia has decided to give Pfizer shots to people who are under 50. And now they have given up on their goal to vaccinate close to all citizens by the end of 2021 due to these problems with AstraZeneca.
Our main project goal was to create a deliverable to present to our community partner. And after throwing around ideas and discussing as a team and with our community partner, we decided on a podcast. Because we wanted to create something that was accessible so it could reach a large audience and something that our community partner could easily distribute as they saw fit. As for the actual focus of the podcast, our goals shifted a bit from what we initially planned. We initially planned to discuss the vaccine rollout and distribution stats across different racial groups in Australia. And after meeting with our community partner, Jennifer Newman, we spoke about the success that the Aboriginal community has had with the pandemic and the lack of acknowledgement from the government. So we decided to switch to a story-focused podcast, just hoping to be able to center the voices of Aboriginal Australians and allow them to tell their own stories regarding the pandemic and their success. And then as for our personal goals, we really all just wanted to make the most out of this opportunity to be able to work with a community partner in Australia and our faculty advisor, Mark, to be able to learn about the culture and history of Aboriginal Australians. And we also wanted to gain a wider understanding of the impact of COVID-19 outside of what we've seen here in the United States. And we also wanted to make sure that we built a strong team dynamic through weekly meetings and consistent communication in order to ensure that we met deadlines and overall had a successful project. And then this is just a general timeline of what steps we took to get here. We first met as a team and shared our individual hopes and goals for this class to come up with a general idea of what we wanted to do. And we also made sure that we did background research beforehand so that we knew what we were talking about. And we created a team contract and assigned roles so that we all had a general idea of what was expected of each of us. And then we moved on to meet with our community partner and get input from them about what they wanted from us, which led us to solidifying a plan and being able to begin scheduling interviews. And then after being able to get some interviews, we conducted the interviews and then went in and picked out clips that we wanted to use for our final podcast.
Some of the obstacles that we've faced have been setting up meetings with our team members, as we all have different schedules and different classes. We also had a really hard time finding time to conduct interviews with our partner and their connections. So we spent a lot of time waiting to hear back from our community partner about potential interviewees, as well as finding time to conduct the interviews where several of our members could come and attend and listen to what was being said. Aside from that, putting together the podcast was an obstacle just because we as a team don't have much podcast experience. But in order to kind of overcome these obstacles, we've been really flexible with our time and still scheduling meetings, even though all of our team members couldn't be there. However, still making sure to follow up with them and fill them in on what was talked about.
So our community partner was Aboriginal Social Services in Australia, which pretty much just provides all type of support to these underrepresented communities. We were able to get information on this organization and all the services it provides through our contact, Jennifer Newman, who was extremely helpful. She has close relationships with the community. We met with her almost weekly just to talk, ask questions, listen to her experiences and her conversations with the community and her observations. And it was all very valuable and insightful information that really helped our project move along. Speaking with her and being able to do these interviews that she connected us with allowed us to help support our community partners' goal of spotlighting their exceptional success in this difficult situation. As a community leader, she was the one who was able to connect us to our interviewees, which we will go into more detail on the next slide. But she was just a very valuable contact. She is very active in the community and serves as an Indigenous representative on the Guardianship Tribunal. And she's also a part of the Community Housing Project, as well as the Institute for Social Justice. She fights for recognition of the Aboriginal communities in Australia and also for equal access to healthcare and all kinds of resources.
We just want to take a minute. Oops, sorry. We just want to take a minute to say thank you to our interviewees. Aside from Jenny, we've been fortunate enough to talk to 4 other people. One of the people we've talked to is Tom Evans, a Wiradjuri man who administers the remote Indigenous business programs at the University of Technology in Sydney. We've also interviewed Helen Gardiner from New South Wales Health, who has a responsibility in Aboriginal health at the state level. We've also talked to Dr. Tara Smith. She's a medical advisor to the Center of Aboriginal Health and an expert of NSW health and COVID-19 response with regard to Aboriginal communities specifically. And finally, we talked to Tim Croft, who is an Aboriginal man working directly in the vaccine rollout. and his family is also connected to a remote community in the area.
So we also decided to add a clip from that will be in our podcast in our interview with Jennifer Newman. These are a couple of quotes that we believed were important, but if Coralie could just start the clip.
It's come out of the reconciliation movement of the 90s, and then sort of ebbed for a bit under the Howard government, which wanted to promote the idea of us all just being Australian. And there's a rising awareness now of the fact that, you know, we're only Aboriginal because non-Aboriginal people came here and created that category. So getting the national heart and mind around that is pretty interesting. And the Uluru Statement from the Heart has been seeping out and changing sensibilities as people think about what it means to be a nation with an Aboriginal population in very small minority, but nevertheless who have a very big heart to continue to push for land rights and civil rights and human rights and Indigenous rights. So I think it would be seen generally as poor form to have a negative view and to be critical of the prioritised rollout to Indigenous Australia would generally be seen as poor form to speak out against that. The other areas that vehemently that gain vehement opposition are land rights, because that touches on the economic base of Australia, and the possibility of a 3% minority of the Australian population impinging on economic development and mining and forestry. That's a different field, and it's where we get very strong opposition. But to critique, to be critical of health, and to say the most vulnerable Australians shouldn't be highest on the priority list would generally be seen as poor form.
So just for a little bit of background on the Aboriginal communities, we just decided, when looking at the central takeaways from research and interviews, to evaluate the historical background of the Aboriginal people and just how that has impacted the present, where these communities have become an underrepresented minority. So looking to the past will explain this. The Indigenous people had been well established in Australia for tens of thousands of years, with 750,000 people in total over the course of 60,000 years. So this was one of the most ancient cultures in the world. However, when Lieutenant James Cook claimed East Australia for Britain in 1770, these colonies were quickly established. And this is when this colonization started, and everything just started to, they just became underrepresented and went through a horrible period of time. We can even connect this to the Jennifer Newman's interview that we just heard, where she says we are only Aboriginal because non-Aboriginal people came here and created that category. She's referring to going as far back as 1770 when this colonization began. And this just completely destroyed the Indigenous population of Australia. In fact, within 10 years, there was an estimated reduction of 90% of the Aboriginal population due to the introduction of new diseases such as smallpox, measles, influenza, also the seizure of lands and direct violent conflict. So the government wanted to create this white Australia and attempted to assimilate Indigenous people by forcing kids out of their homes, thinking that it would be easier for them to assimilate. And this was just, they committed numerous atrocities to these communities. These children came to be known as the Stolen Generation, and this lasted from 1910 to the 1970s, so not even that long ago. And there have been significant lasting effects of this up until today. And just looking at this background will allow us to understand why they have more difficulty accessing healthcare and why they're so underrepresented, and what we can do looking forward.
Yeah, so as Tara had just outlined, there was a pretty brutal past between mainland Australia and the Aboriginal population there. And so, of course, that it wasn't that long ago, and it still has those lasting effects that we see today, like in public health, education, basically everything around. So we were very surprised to hear how successful they had been, even overcoming all those obstacles that they faced. So our main question was really how and why has the Aboriginal population been so successful in regard to COVID? And so from our research and interviews, we basically came away with two main points. And so the first one was basically their culture. So their culture, like Mark had outlined before our presentation, it's very community-based, and they have a very high respect for elders and for keeping the community safe. And so Tom Evans, one of the people we interviewed and an Aboriginal man, he stated, quote, "Apart from our work, we have very little need to engage with people outside our communities." And so, as you can see on the right, that like little green piece of artwork was done by an Aboriginal as well. And so I don't know if you can tell on that piece of artwork, but it says "Protect our country from COVID," and then it says "Keep our kids safe." So it's very community based in the messaging and all that. And you see like the little hands with the dotted art, which I thought was very interesting and neat. And then Coralie, would you mind just playing the first 15 seconds of that video on the bottom right? Not that, yeah. Just to see the messaging from the government.
COVID-19 is a sickness that can spread from person to person. It can be dangerous, especially for our elders or people who are already unwell. We can all help stop the spread in our communities. Cover a cough with the inside of your elbow instead of your hand.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I just thought it would be interesting to put that type of messaging in that's coming directly from the government with the Aboriginals in mind, because as you can see, like right away, it says "keep our mob safe." And then they talked a lot about in the video, like just within the first couple of seconds, about keeping our communities and our elders safe and kind of passing it forward. And then the second piece why we thought the Aboriginal population was so successful was that the state governments took control quickly and had really effective messaging, in contrast to the Commonwealth government, which is sort of the overarching government, which has really not established trust with the Aboriginal communities, as I'll talk about later on. And then, so we have a little audio clip to play here too.
We do a lot of work in non-COVID times to try and improve the health system and increase representation for Aboriginal people and self-governance and all of that kind of work. And this time it was enough. Like, it's not perfect, but it was enough to hit that threshold that we can actually do this. So we had, key people in leadership positions making decisions. We had enough allies across everywhere who would be listening to those decisions. We had good buy-in, that like resources.
Yeah, so that was Helen Gardner, who is another person that we interviewed, and she's from more of like a state government program. And like I said before, they did take control quickly and were doing work even like before, like leading up to COVID, because they knew like something was coming. We're right on it. And they've established more trust with the Aboriginal communities, so their messaging is more likely to be receptive. Next slide, please.
COVID-19 is a sickness that
Yeah, and then so after that, we still established that there are still issues and barriers to equity that Aboriginal people are facing still today, even though they did so well in spite of COVID. And so the first thing that we want to talk about is representation in government. So that's a huge thing for the Aboriginal people that we've discovered after talking with them and doing some research into the area. So I think someone had mentioned the Uluru Statement from the Heart before, which can be seen, it's the leftmost picture down below. And so an important quote that I really liked from that document was, "We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country," When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. And so this document is really about kind of making a treaty and making peace with the rest of Australia, the white Australia, and sort of moving forward together and trying to gain voice in government, because they don't currently have that given by like constitutional rights. So they're hoping to gain that constitutional right of having a voice in government. And then so another one is improving educational attainment. So that has actually been improved through the Closing the Gap project, which is like Taylor had mentioned before, the big gap between the life expectancy. So they're trying to narrow that gap, hence Closing the Gap. So that's the only thing that's really been working from Closing the Gap, which is from the Commonwealth government, as you can see on the picture on the right. So those are the only ones that are being on track to meet expectations, and everything else is falling behind. And then so another big point was food availability and insecurity, because a lot of these communities are in more rural areas where it's difficult to get healthy and cheap food. And then increasing public awareness and resources for health. So the burden of disease is actually 2.3 times higher than the rest of the population, even though they did so well with COVID. And so Tim Croft, who we talked to, was very big about telling, like truth telling, he called it. And so he needed to spread truth and awareness, sort of like we're doing in the States with Black Lives Matter, about the troubling history of the nation and the issues that they still face now, and sort of how we go from here and how we progress. So if you wouldn't mind just playing the Tim Croft clip.
So in Australia, we're still here. We live on. We consider ourselves the sovereign carers or owners of our country, which isn't still recognised in our national constitution. So there's a long way for our country to go, but there are steps taken towards reconciliation and acknowledging important things, and truth-telling is part of that. So this forms the big history for Aboriginal people. And I bring those up because resilience really played the big part in, I think, how our First Nations people here have responded to the pandemic.
Yeah, and so that concludes our presentation. We should have our works cited on the next slide. And yeah, we wanted to thank everyone in this class and everyone for coming, and Mark and all our interviewees for their like availability and their kindness. Yeah.
Hey, then, does anyone have any questions for Group A? Elizabeth?
I know, sorry. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I just wanted to just really thank you for the beautiful quote about, being an Aboriginal only because someone is calling us such, and how much this is relevant for all, the ethnic groups that we've been discussing about in this course, right? This sentence literally does apply to so many fields that it's really important. And I have a very broad question in terms of, whether you felt that you had to face some cultural, if you had some cultural challenges in approaching the Aboriginal community, and how you think you could respond to that with your job, with your work on this project. And then as a sort of a following up question, if you felt, the responsibility of telling, someone's story and their history, right, in terms of the big history, as one of the interviewee said. So just thank you overall for the whole project, and these are my two curiosities.
Yeah, so just to touch on the first part, it was definitely helpful that we got to talk to Jennifer Newman first, who, kind of gave us a general overview of what, topics would be of interest to the people, some ways to approach them. She mentioned asking them what country they're from as a way of greeting. And then she mentioned that we should just, let them take the reins and let them tell their story, bring up the things that they think are interesting and that, they want to share, because ultimately we were just hoping to provide a spotlight and bring their thoughts to light.
Yeah, and then just a small point to add on to that too, like what Taylor was saying, allowing them to kind of tell their story. What I found to be really useful was at the end of the interview, I, like whoever was doing the interview, would always ask, like, is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to talk about? And sort of like giving them like that final opportunity to kind of like get whatever word out that they want to get out. And I think that's just like a helpful tip in like any interview basically, but it was especially helpful here.
Yeah, I think one thing that was really special, and I hope I know that Jacob thought it was, and I'm sure others would too, was when we interviewed Tim Croft, or when you interviewed Tim Croft. He gave you a very fulsome kind of acknowledgement of country and welcome to country, about because a lot of Aboriginal people really when you move into their country, they want to pay you respect because they want respect from you that they are custodians of the land. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think I am hoping that that's in the podcast because it's a powerful point. I know it's difficult because there are cultural sensitivities around it, but that form of acknowledgement is really important. And in a sense, this podcast, in a sense, we are kind of walking onto Aboriginal land, in a metaphorical sense, because we're going inside, we're learning about the culture, and we're hearing things from them that they don't normally share with white Australia. We were privileged to hear about these things. The interviews were very long. Yeah. Every single person wanted to give us more than an hour of their time, and some could have just kept going. But every bit of it was kind of riveting and purposeful and rich. The story we were hearing. So it's a wonderful way to engage with Aboriginal culture because, as I said, it's a storytelling culture, and it's probably the best way to engage with Aboriginal people. So I commend the group for taking on this approach because it's not easy, and actually even in terms of knowing how to produce something out of this isn't easy, because you're left with these incredible stories, and you want to pay them respect, and it's very difficult to do that. I could sit there and listen to all of those in their entirety again, but it would be a 6-hour job, 6 or 7 hours worth of interviews. So it would be interesting. Okay, that's all I want to say, except that I really personally enjoyed being along for the ride with you guys, and I know I talk too much, and I'm sorry about that, but I hope that some of what I said made some sense along the way, and I had a good time, and I think there was a real purpose served, because I should have said this at the beginning. This story is such a powerful success story. One of the slides, for instance, I think it was the social media platform group, put up a slide which showed the different rates of infection in the US. And the first column was Native Americans, and it was the highest rate of infection, the highest rate of hospitalization. So First Nations people around the world have been absolutely slammed by the pandemic, but not in Australia, not in Australia. So there's your success story right there.
Do we have any other questions for Team A? This is me leaning forward. Okay. I really want to thank everybody from all over the world who came to join us today to watch these presentations. I especially want to thank our students for putting in a lot of effort, for being up in the middle of the night sometimes, for handling the challenges of doing this on Zoom all over the world with grace and dedication. I want to thank everybody who is involved in this, our community sponsors, all of the faculty, Mark and Elisabetta and I, we had our own team dynamic that we dealt with and did a great job. And I know this is like the last time we're all going to be together. So to the students, thanks so very much. To the community partners, thanks so very much. To our guests, thanks so very much. And everybody get ready to have, like, you know, a bomb summer.
Thank you all.
Oh, thank you to Sarah Van Kirk, who was our technical director. And I can tell you, the three of us would not have been able to do this without her. She's just on point with everything and did the tutorial for the students who used VideoScribe. Thanks so much, Sarah. We really appreciate it.